Warrior Cats is a book series started in 2003 by a group of authors called the Aaron Hunters, often just called the Aarons by the Fandom. It is a book series revolving around anthropomorphic cats living in the wild, having battles and religious turmoil. The series has become wildly popular and has gained a community of dedicated fans who make anything from animated tributes to video games based on the events of the series or the world. Wings of Fire is a book series which was first published in 2012 by T. Sutherland, a former Aaron. It deals with humanized dragons locked in a devastating continent-wide war, which is rumored to be solved by a mysterious prophecy, and later deals with an ancient menace returning from beyond the grave and the hive mind taking over an entire continent. Like Warrior Cats, it has a very dedicated fandom. These fandoms, of course, have overlap. Fans commonly participate in each other's maps, and it is rumored that every single Wings of Fire fan found Warrior Cats first. I didn't, showing there are clear exceptions to that rule. Despite the friendship between the two fandoms, there's a clear rivalry over whose series is the best. So today, I'm here to take a position on which book series is the best. I'll be judging it in 6 categories: fandom, games, representation, writing style, story, and characters. Whoever wins the most categories, of course, wins the entire thing and is declared the best book series. So let's figure out which book series is the superior one. Before we get started, if you are new to this channel, please think about subscribing. I regularly post both Wings of Fire and Warrior Cats content, so you'll never be bored. And to my current subscribers, thank you so much for supporting me. I wouldn't have gotten here without y'all. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Let's start with the story. Warrior Cats is over 100 books long. It has a lot of stories within it. The most iconic solo story is Mapleshade's Vengeance, and within the book's most well-known narrative is Ashford's Obsession, a plot that starts in the 2nd arc and concludes all the way in the 6th, or the 7th arc, depending on how you label them. However, the problem with having a story that long and a timeline that takes place across so many books is that the story can become a bit convoluted, leading to plot holes and people being too confused to even start the series. I've been working on a Warrior Cats timeline video for a long time, and it's been very difficult for me to keep up with the books. In that way, the amount of stories is a detriment. The plot is just too large for new readers to keep up with. On the other hand, from having too much story, there's too little story in some books. Some books are literally just talking books where characters stand around and talk and nothing gets done. Another type of filler book is the traveling book, a book that has appeared in literally every single arc since New Prophecy, which is considered skippable as well. Even worse, the conclusion to one of the arcs is skippable. It is commonly known that in A Vision of Shadows, the Aarons killed off their villain halfway through. Left with nothing else to do, the Aarons decide to have the cats run around like chickens with their heads cut off for the last half of the arc. Wings of Fire, on the other hand, has only 21 or so books. With much less content, there are fewer plot holes and plot threads are rarely dropped. There are also no filler books. An argument can be made for The Dangerous Gift being a filler book, as very little in that book matters later, but The Dangerous Gift works well as a story all on its own. Unlike Warrior Cats filler books where the cats do nothing, the dragons do something, as Snowfall has an entire character arc within the span of one book, and her character arc is perhaps the best written in the entire series. I'm going to have to give the point to Wings of Fire. Though it has less story being a smaller book series, its threads are better curated. Next up, writing style. Warrior Cats has a very long-winded descriptive writing style. It's as if the authors had painted the entire scene in their heads and are now just describing it on paper. It also has some killer dialogue lines, such as "kill me and live with the memory," and then "tell the stars that you won." However, sometimes it can get a bit too long-winded for its own good, and it can come off as melodramatic, boring, or just plain filler, especially in the more recent arcs. Meanwhile, when it comes to Wings of Fire, descriptions are often kept brief. Things are described, but there's a lot of room for imagination. The only problem I have with Wings of Fire is that bathos pops up a bit. Bathos uses comedy to offset the emotions of a scene. If you've ever watched a Marvel movie where a character is joking when someone is dying right in front of them, that's bathos in action. I'm going to have to make writing style a tie, because I feel like this is more of a subjective thing than anything else, even though this entire list is subjective, so I'm just going to refrain from giving a point to either of them. Now let's talk about the characters. Warrior Cats has many characters. It has well over 1,000 characters at this point, and around 100 of them have had at least one point of view chapter in a book. In the main series, there have been 17 arc-long protagonists, not counting repeats, I believe. The problem is the characters have grown stagnant. With recent arcs, the formula for the main character has pretty much been the same. There's the anxious medicine cat who likely struggles with eldritch terror, the fiery rebellious one, and the normal one who you often skip chapters from. Their point of view. At least one of the protagonists is in a half-clan relationship, if not both in the case of the Broken Code and the Starless Clan. Beyond that, the errands are inconsistent with characterization. A character written to act one way in a book might behave in a completely different way in the next due to changing authors, or the plot needing a character to behave in a specific way. An entire book's worth of characterization might be thrown out because they need that character to cause conflict again. In Wings of Fire, there are significantly less characters. In total, there are around 200 named characters. There are 15 main books, each of them with a different dragon as its point of view, 4 novellas with different dragons as a point of view, and 2 super editions with 3 POVs each. Though there are less characters by a significant margin, the characters are more distinct and have better arcs, which are more consistent throughout the books. And Then Me, for example, has an arc starting in Book 2, The Lost Heir, and ending in the 10th book, Darkness of Dragons, where she went from shy and protected to a brat enjoying her freedom to someone still deeply sarcastic but also feeling guilty over her actions. The last we heard of her, she was healing and doing well. While Warrior Cats does have these arcs, sometimes it's hard to tell whether it's intentional, or whether a different Aaron is writing a cat differently and it was not intentional. Besides from caricature, we also have character voice. In Warrior Cats, no character has a strong voice. I've gone through a chapter and not realized it was a different point of view from the last chapter until the very end. Jay Feather is probably the most unique voice in the series because he is a blind cat, so he doesn't describe what he sees. I have to admit, the reveal that Jay Feather was blind surprised me because of how well his perspective was written, and I didn't notice it, and perhaps because it was also so similar to the cats that saw. When it comes to Wings of Fire, all characters have a very strong voice and you can clearly tell who's thinking what, which is incredibly important when one of your main characters is a mind reader. Peril's thoughts are littered with capital letters and bolds, while Turtle's are more subdued, long, and full of guilt. For characters, though Warrior Cats has countless characters to fall in love with, Tui handles them better and makes it easier for you to fall in love. I'll have to give the star to Wings of Fire. Representation is the next thing up on the board. You might be wondering, representing what? Representing various aspects of the queer community is what? Warrior Cats has LGBT characters. Some famous examples include Barley and Ravenpaw, Jake and Tallstar, and possibly Rowanclaw. Barley and Ravenpaw are pretty explicitly shown to be mates in the books. Barley talks about Ravenpaw just as one cat will discuss their past mate. However, they are never explicitly called mates in the text, leaving some room for denial. Same thing with Tallstar and Jake. The two of them are never referred to as a romantic pair, when any straight couple acting the way they did would probably get labeled as such in the books. Rowanclaw is a character commonly headcanon to be trans. The authors have even gone out of their way to highlight that, as in the Rowanclaw gallery on the official Warrior Cats website, a large number of the pieces featured a trans flag. Despite that, he is never referred to as trans in the books. The errands constantly hint at characters being queer, with none of them ever being explicitly confirmed. This is pretty much queer baiting. One may argue that the errands are afraid of homophobic backlash. However, the errands have been very embracing of their queer fans, such as firing known turf Gilliam Phillips once fans spoke out. This just makes it even stranger. Perhaps they're afraid of foreign markets? Even stranger! The number of queer characters hasn't increased as society becomes more accepting, like it has in most franchises. Instead, the number of queer characters only went down from the first arc. Now, every single queer-coded character is dead, besides for Barley, and he's knocking on death's doorstep at this point. Contrast the Virgin Warrior Cast with the Chad Wings of Fire. Wings of Fire's first arc didn't confirm any characters as a queer, though it did have a few characters who were confirmed in later arcs, like Umber and Jambu. The second arc gave us 2 bisexual, or at least bi-curious, protagonists, Keebly and Winter. It's arguable that the strongest character arc belonged to a lesbian dragon, Anemone, who's shown to be pursuing a relationship with the Dragoness. None of these characters are pushed off to the side, like they are in Warrior Cats. In the third arc started off incredibly strong with the protagonist of the first book, Blue, having 2 mothers. It also introduces Sundew, who is revealed to be dating a Dragoness later. Sundew gets her own book as well, meaning that Wings of Fire has a confirmed queer main character. unlike Ravenclaw where it is heavily hinted, but the Aarons just can't seem to spit out the word gay to describe him. The third arc also had a character use they/them pronouns, which is incredibly rare, especially in children's fiction. I don't even think this is a fight at all, Wings of Fire slaughtered warrior cats when it comes to representation. Next up, games. You might be confused about this category, but let me explain. I feel as though the gaming side of the fandoms is something that can't be ignored. They add something interesting and entertaining to the fandom, and it can't be denied how many fans got into Warrior Cats and Wings of Fire just from the Roblox games. Warrior Cats has the most pervasive gaming side. The gaming side of the fandom has always been active. I remember playing Warrior Cats games on Scratch in school because the firewall didn't ban Scratch. Warrior Cats has had a rich history on Roblox dating back to 2012. Since then, the games have only evolved, and nowadays there's even a Roblox game recognized officially by the Aarons, a long way from humble origins. Warrior Cats even has original games, and by that I mean games built from the bottom up. There are two I know of, Untold Tales and Clan Gen, but I know there are more countless RPG Maker Warrior Cat games out there. Wings of Fire has more quality games over the quantity. There are very few games, but the ones I've seen tend to be higher quality than Warrior Cats. I feel like the reason why there are so few games is because dragons are much more complex than cats. Dragons have 6 limbs, when cats only have 4. Dragons are much harder to code and much harder to draw and animate. For this point, I'll have to go with Warrior Cats. And last but not least, the fandom. Warrior Cats has a fandom that has become somewhat infamous for toxicity. I've seen people harassed off of Tumblr, Discord, anywhere you can roleplay for not following proper cat genetics, with an example being Albino Scourge. I've seen people on YouTube get harassed for not finishing their part for a map on time, or for not animating as complexly as other animators, etc. It's gotten ridiculous to the point that some Tumblr people decide to create a drama calendar, where they decide to start drama once a month for fun. The majority of people didn't catch on that it was a joke, and some even joined them despite all the drama on the calendar being designed to be ridiculous. Of course, it was eventually exposed that they were just playing around with people, and they haven't done it since. But of course, not all drama is for ridiculous reasons. Some reasons are good, like art theft, which is a very common issue, especially on the TikTok side of things. Some people are toxic or do terrible things to people. Of course, those people should be exiled from the fandom. I'm not arguing that they shouldn't. However, it's overwhelming sometimes. Like, can we have a week where we're calm? Can we agree sometimes not to hold people to ridiculously hard standards or to talk to people before starting drama? Despite how toxic the fandom is, one cannot deny its accomplishments. There have been countless animated series based off of the books, or people's Warrior Cats OCs. Likewise, there have been multiple animated projects based on songs or voice acting clips which rival the quality of professionally animated series or movies. On the fanfiction side, people are compelled to use the world of Warriors to create amazing stories, and when they don't like canon, they change it through their fanfiction. Even if people do like the canon, they can change what happens in it through AUs. My favorite fanfictions are Ouroboros and Love What Is Mortal. Major trigger warnings on the second one though. On the other side, we have the Wings of Fire fandom. There is less drama, but is comparatively barren. Don't get me wrong, Wings of Fire is a vibrant fandom. It has a lot of great projects and fanfiction as well. However, compared to Warrior Cats, Wings of Fire is a much smaller fan base. The fan base also isn't very old either. Warrior Cats was started in 2002, and Wings of Fire almost a decade later. Warrior Cats has had more time to amass fans. I remember like yesterday when Hacia was the largest name in the fandom, and the only fanfic writer that pretty much anyone knew was Rhino Bullrack. Wings of Fire doesn't have giant Discord servers like Warrior Cats does, nor does it have giant map projects, though it does have some mapathons, some of which I participated in. I feel like though the Warrior Cats fandom has drama, it's still a good fandom, and it's impossible to not have drama in a fandom that size. I've seen fandoms much smaller and much more toxic. Wings of Fire is a less toxic fandom, however is much smaller. I'm gonna have to give Warrior Cats the fandom point for just how many fun and good ideas it has. Those are all the categories and why I thought each book series won the category that it did. Let's see who won. For the story, Wings of Fire won. For writing style, we had a tie. And with characters, Wings of Fire won, and it won again for representation. In the final two categories, Gaming and Fandom, Warriors won. That is 3 points of Wings of Fire and only 2 for Warrior Cats, making Wings of Fire the winner, and the best book series in my opinion. Though Warrior Cats had a revival in the second half, that's because of its fandom, not because of its authors. Wings of Fire, on the other hand, has earned almost all of its points due to the actions of the author, so I have to proudly declare this a victory for Wings of Fire. Do you agree with the results? Which fandom do you think is better? Comment down below. If you liked this video, feel free to subscribe. I make Wings of Fire and Warrior Cats videos pretty often, and your support would mean a lot to me. And to those who have already subscribed, thank you for your continued support. I wouldn't have gone here without y'all. Peace, Rogan out.